South America, 15 million years ago. A monster creature called the terror bird is the king of beasts in this terrain.
You look at them, they had this absolutely huge head. This would have been a very powerful weapon.
For the only time in history, a bird is top predator on an entire continent. Then, the terror bird treks 7,000 miles to North America. Here, fierce wolves and saber-toothed cats rule the land. And the giant bird has a fight on its hands. In this epic conflict, who would prevail? The birds from the south or the beasts of the north? In the chronicle of life on Earth, dinosaurs reigned as history's greatest predators. They ruled the planet for 150 million years, but came to a sudden end 65 million years ago. Many believe an asteroid or comet killed off the dinosaurs. Once they were gone, the job of top predator was open. Mammals would become great predators on the rest of the planet. But in South America, things were different. The Isthmus of Panama had not yet appeared, and water surrounded the continent. In this isolation, evolution took a strangely different turn. The continent was a giant island, laced with open savannas bordered by forests. Here, the mammals were docile plant eaters, ranging from large sloths to bizarre armored creatures such as the glyptodont. In this setting, the role of top predator went to a family of freakishly monstrous birds. Today, we call them the terror birds, and they ruled for 58 million years.
If you look at the head, is enormous, like in all terror birds, and the bird would have been able to strike with enormous force, and such a force that by hitting a prey, it would have possibly killed the prey almost instantly.
How could birds have attained such power? Evidence of the true nature of these enigmatic beasts is found first in fossil beds and later in scientific laboratories. But the terror bird family remains largely a mystery. The fossil record reluctantly giving up clues in an ongoing investigation that began more than 120 years ago. The year was 1887. Paleontologist Florentino Ameghino wrote of a fossil unearthed in Argentina's Patagonia region. It was part of a strange toothless jawbone from a skull that would have been 2 feet long. So big, thought Ameghino, it must belong to a mammal.
Then, in time, with more discoveries and more studies, he realized that he had made a mistake.
It took scientists another 4 years to identify the big predators as birds. The key clues were in the center of the fossil bones themselves. Dr. Luis Chiappi is one of the world's foremost experts on these creatures. He studies terror birds at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles.
Sometimes it's not easy to tell apart a bird bone from one that is either of a mammal or another reptile. But one thing that in general is quite consistent is that bird bones are hollowed and they have very thin walls, as opposed to the bones of reptiles or mammals that are not. Here on my right hand, I have the bone of a crocodile, and you can see the difference.
In time, a scattering of other fossils was discovered. Birds, yes, but what kind? They were undoubtedly big and certainly flightless. And then, skulls with sharp hooked beaks turned up, meaning these were monster carnivores.
When they finally found a complete skull of a terror bird, they knew then that it was not a toothless mammal, but that in fact it was a predatory bird, and a gigantic predatory bird.
Hooked beaks and sharp talons are two characteristics terror birds share with all modern raptors. But scale it up to the size of a 6-foot, 400-pound bird, and the result is frightening. In the 100 years after the first discovery, scientists collected enough fossils to identify 17 different species of terror birds. They varied widely in size and lived at different times during a period nearly 60 million years long. But in 2005, the unexpected happened. What appeared to be a totally new terror bird came to light in Argentina. High school student Guillermo Aguirre-Zabala was fossil hunting with a friend when they stumbled onto an historic discovery. Guillermo, now a paleontology student in Buenos Aires, had been interested in fossils ever since he was a young boy.
El hallazgo fue
The find was in the summer of 1999. I don't remember the exact date, but it had to be March.
tiene que ser marzo.
It all happened outside the village of Camacho, near the western edge of Argentina's vast region of Patagonia. Terror birds are known to have ranged from here through Uruguay and Brazil.
Nosotros ya habíamos encontrado algún que otro fósil, unas mandíbulas.
We had already found some other fossils, so we knew where to look and how to recognize fossils.
Y conocer los fósiles. Este particularmente estaba.
This one in particular was almost completely covered.
cubierto.
When we found the first pieces, we made contact with the Paleontology Museum in Bariloche.
Nos contactamos con la gente.
That's where we learned how to dig around the fossil and extract it.
Y bueno, ahí es donde aprendimos a extraer fósil.
Guillermo and his friend carefully covered their find and took it 40 miles away to the town of Bariloche. They gave it to the town's tiny paleontology museum, where it remained nearly unnoticed for 5 years. When Luis Chiappe learned of the find, he led an international team to determine the new specimen's place in the family of terror birds. He discovered it was a totally new species.
Seeing this enormous skull that's about 20, almost 30 inches in length is just like, psh. I mean, it's a wow moment, no question about that.
Chiappe's team dated the skull at 15 million years old and named it Kelenken Guillermoy. Kelenken for a native Patagonian spirit, Guillermoy for Guillermo. Kelenken was a spectacular find. It was a new species with a head unlike any other bird in history.
At 28 inches long and with a skull essentially bigger than that of a horse, the skull of Kelenken is the largest bird skull ever.
Chiappe compared other terror bird fossils to Kelenken's skull, plus a leg and toe bone found with it. He hoped to learn how big Kelenken was, how strong, how fast.
See whether we can talk to Sarah.
By examining the skull from a smaller terror bird, Luis Chiappe begins to get an idea of what the new species looked like. While in Bariloche, paleontologist Sarah Bertelli analyzes Kelenken bones in the town museum. Comparing measurements of these few specimens with other terror birds, they can estimate the critical dimensions of Kelenken itself. Although the skull was the most spectacular find, a complete leg bone also provided surprises.
Este es el hueso de la pata de Kelenken.
This is the bone that corresponds in humans to the connection between the ankle and the toes.
The proportions of the leg bone are unexpectedly slender for such a large bird. Some other large terror bird species are thick-framed and thought to have been slow ambush predators. Kelenken, with these bones, is different.
Por eso, en las aves de terror, que son
In the largest and heaviest terror birds, this bone is short and stout, but in the faster birds, this bone is long and slender. That's why we think Kelenken was a fast runner.
lo cual nosotros pensamos que era un corredor.
Kelenken is among the tallest and fastest in the terror bird family. It weighs in at 400 pounds and stands 7 feet tall. It stands on slender but muscular legs, hinting at a fast running speed. From beak to tail, it's 9 feet long. But when seen from the front, it appears surprisingly narrow at 18 inches wide, perhaps less obvious to prey animals on the lookout. But Bertelli discovers that the bird's sheer size takes a back seat to the enormous strength of its bite. The bones of Kelenken's skull bear scars of massive muscles attached to the temples, a clue to the power of its gigantic jaws. These muscles control the bite force in most animals and represent one of the things even humans have in common with terror birds.
Si colocamos nuestra mano en esta zona,
If we put our hand up here and open the jaw, we can feel the contraction of the temporal muscles.
la contracción de los músculos temporales. Estos músculos, la cicatriz dejada por estos músculos en el cráneo.
The scars left by these muscles occupy a large part of the skull's roof. That gives us an idea of the tremendous bite force this bird had.
Tremenda fuerza que tenía esta ave al morder.
Another set of scars reveals powerful neck muscles. With such strength, the terror bird was fearsome in lashing out viciously with its frightening beak and its nail-like hook.
The terror bird, using its head as a pickaxe, would plunge the nail of the beak into the prey animal, and it would slice through meat, but also through certain bones.
A terror bird's head was a killing machine, a weapon propelling it to the height of power, becoming South America's unchallenged apex predator. In South America, the head of the terror bird Kelenken is driving new research into these extraordinary predators. The fossil skulls of the terror bird family are evidence of their use as weapons for swift, efficient attacks. But now, advanced technology can tell us how those skulls worked.
All right, this will be exciting.
In the United States, 2 scientists prepare to use a medical CAT scanner to probe the inner structure of terror bird skulls.
Let's get this thing set up.
Larry Whitmer is a professor of anatomy at Ohio University. He's hosting Bob Chandler, a terror bird specialist from Georgia State College and University.
All right.
What are you doing now?
We're going to get it lined up here so that we can get it sort of centered and square within the X-ray beam. So we'll run the laser right down the top there. We're good.
The process takes the skull of a terror bird and turns it inside out. The entire scan lasts less than a minute, but the pictures it produces will provide clues to the nature and behavior of terror birds as they lived and hunted.
One thing we can tell by looking at the skull is that this is a relatively very strong skull. We can see that this pillar in front of the eye socket is really tall and strong. We see this bar along the cheek line right in this area is also tall and relatively thick, suggesting that the skull was built for both delivering and withstanding relatively large stresses.